Well, welcome folks to Builder Showcase. This is number 4. Once again, this is Elaine Seats' baby here. She came up with the idea, and I run a private chat group and on Google, and a lot of times people post, and that's it. Post a picture, a little blurb, and that's it. And Elaine said, "Well, I want to go a little deeper on this," and so she said, "Why don't we do a little Zoom meeting here once a month? Invite somebody to talk about their work that they're doing." And I thought that was a great idea. So as people go ahead and join in here, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Elaine. And Elaine, you can just take it away and introduce our guest for tonight.
I'll do that. Thank you, Robbie. And our guest tonight for number 4 is Steve Foss. And I have to tell you that when we had the original idea with Robbie and started talking about who to have on here, Steve's name came up immediately. And I think Steve and Robbie must go way back, even to the in-person days.
Yes, back at the college. Yep.
And I have to tell you, Steve and I have talked several times in preparation for this interview, I guess, and it's been great. And so tonight is a little different. I have to tell you, I thought everybody on this was gonna, show their latest and greatest guitar, and here's where I got the wood, and here's what I've done. And it turns out people are showing up and saying, "Let me show you this thing I did." And it might be, like with Doug, I see you were here. It might be the first thing they did, or it might be the crazy thing they did, or it might be the special thing they did. So there's a full range of it. And so Steve tonight, I think Steve is really going to show us his experiment. He's got 2 experiments he did, and so he's going to show us these 2 experiments. And I have to tell you, it's really fascinating. Steve has done what I have wanted to do, but it takes me so long to build a guitar, and everything I do so different as a beginner. And it's not much of an experiment with me. It's just a struggle to get them finished. So with that, let me introduce Steve Foss, and Steve, what we've talked about this, and I think what we want to do is just jump right in, and um, I'll give a little intro here, and then let Steve talk about it while I get the video going. But fundamentally, Steve went to Robbie's shop, and he recorded the same song 4 times. And it's not because it's the only song he can play.
Wait,
so we can compare. Well, maybe so. And you did get better every time you played it. But all that aside, he played the same song the same way every time. And so his first guitar is a Martin Dreadnought. Looks like a herringbone. I was looking at it closer. And he plays it on the classic Martin Dread. And then he plays the same song on 2 aughts that only have one difference as best he could build them. That's 2 and 3. And then the 4th one is like this whole different guitar that none of us build one like. It's a Larson. And so the cool thing is, Steve, I played with our video some today. And once we start that video, we need to not talk until the whole thing plays. It's about 3 minutes, because once we start talking, it's hard to hear the difference in them. But hopefully you all are going to be able to hear the difference in these 4 guitars, and make some notes about what you hear that's different. And then we'll hear what Steve did and start to think about what made the differences. So Steve, if you want to get started, let me try to get this video going here, and okay. The floor is all yours.
So my idea was based on something that Robbie kind of harped on when I was in the class, or a couple of classes that I took there at the college when he was teaching. And it was when we were working on tops, which fascinated me because I had no idea how they work or didn't work. He kept saying, think about stiffness and looseness. And so I came up with this plan. Over the years, I ended up building several guitars. And at one time, I was building a single O for a friend of mine. And I thought, well, I'll build 2 of them and he can pick the one he likes. And I built them slightly differently. And we'll talk about that after the video plays. And my thought process here for tonight was to demonstrate how much difference there is between these guitars. That's why I played the same song. Also, in between each song, I waited until the guitar stopped ringing, even though, at least on my little tablet here, I can't hear it that long. But in person, I could hear it ringing as long as you see me waiting. So it, the sustain was what I was listening for.
All right. So
so
Steve,
go
you're
right
ready to
ahead.
start them. Okay, so the first is the Martin Dread, right?
Yep.
The next two are the Parlors.
Yep.
They're twins.
Yep.
Then the fourth one is a Larson, and it's about the size of a double aught. Is that correct? Approximately.
That is exactly right. It's about that size.
All right. So if you all sort of get ready to talk about what we hear different, here we go.
All right, this is a single O that I built as a pair. The difference here, this one has 2 tone bars and the other one has 1. So here we go. All right, this is the single O, the other of the fraternal twins, with a single tone bar across the bottom. Okay, this is a guitar I built in the modeled after the Larson Brothers guitars of the 20s and 30s.
All right. So, what do you all think? Can you hear a difference in them? Is it coming through over what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Tony, I'm an old school teacher. You should have never shook your head yes, because I'm going to call on you. What'd you hear?
Well, Steve, these are fantastic guitars, and I've never built anything smaller than an OM, and I'm blown away. They're beautiful sounding guitars. What it proves to me is size matters. Obviously, a Dreadnought is a bigger, fuller sounding, especially on the bass end. But your mids and the trebles, I think, on your O's are great. The Larson, I'm not so sure about. It's hard for things to come across, processed so many ways before it gets to my ears here. But they're great. They're beautiful guitars. Nice job.
Thank you.
Gary, else heard a difference? Gary, you hear a difference?
The thing that struck me on the second one was it was twangier, especially in the beginning. That was really the biggest difference that I noticed.
Doug, you know you're next. Did you hear a difference?
I agree with Gary. With the second one, it had a lot more of a mid-high punch to it, but they all sounded great.
Mhm.
Robbie, you heard them in person.
I did.
Do you recall
Yes.
the
And
differences?
I do. As far as I can tell, the Dread, even on the computer through those headphones and stuff, is just kind of bass heavy and
Mhm.
muddy. The mid range and lower end just didn't seem like it had much definition. However, in a bluegrass band, you're competing with other instruments and stuff. You're probably fine. I found that the single O's were my preferred instruments to listen to. The difference between focus between the Dread and the single O's with the mid range and the trebles is just incredible. I mean, it just seems so much more melodic and focused in that mid range and treble. And of those two, I think the second one that had the single tone bar was my preferred, and that's probably just because today's Sunday. If it were Monday or Saturday, you know, who knows? But I think that one with the single tone bar was my preferred instrument. I didn't much care for the Larson though.
Yeah, what's interesting is, I'm just getting into building, for a year, 2 years, something like that. Very untrained ear, I guess you would say. I've been listening to a lot of the Michael Bashkin Luthier on Luthier podcasts, and in those especially, they talk about the various, the low end, mid range, and my ear is not trained like that. And then listening to something like this, it's almost like going to the movies with somebody who's in the movie business, right? If you go to the movies with somebody who's in the movie business and they're a sound guy, that's all they're going to talk about in the film. Or if they're a gaffer, they're just going to talk about how the thing was lit up. Or if they're a director, so it's what you know is what you're kind of attuned to, and it's almost it almost ruins it. Not to downplay the guitars or anything, but to be able to make a guitar, especially for the first time, and you show your friends, wow, that's so cool that that you bent the wood and you took all that solid wood and made this out of it. To get into the technical stuff of it, it almost takes some of the magic away.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, you're right. It
Well,
does.
I'll do my part and chip in. I've got dreads. I play in a bluegrass band, and if you drug those aughts and that Larson out with a banjo, you'd never hear it. So dreads have a place, and they have a place. But it was amazing to me to hear how good they sounded. If I were building a guitar to play around the house and not have to throw my shoulder out of joint trying to play, those parlors were great. And I guess I sort of, Robbie, opposite to you, I found that the one tone bar, and this was my first time, the first time through, I thought this too. The single tone bar to me is just a little bright and needs some of the mids or something. Whatever bass was there sounded more like you were plucking on a plastic string instead of a real string. And the Larson kind of really did that for me. And so I sort of like the two tone bars because I thought I got just a little bit more support from from the mids and the lower tones. But I'm a bluegrasser at heart. What can I say? So you have to always color that. But
You would have loved my last student that I just finished with yesterday. He's a bluegrass player.
there you
And
go.
we built a Dread, and he played a little Doc Watson, and it's
Yeah.
fantastic, fantastic instrument and fantastic player and singer. And we did a little video of it. It's on YouTube if you want to look for it.
Cool. So, Steve, let me start up the presentation, and if you want to start talking about these guitars a little more, I'll get that going. And the first slide is going to be the one with the books, if you want to start on them, and we'll keep this moving.
So, okay, so give me a little bit of time here because
Okay.
I gab a little bit. So the two single aught guitars, the same top wood. They were both Adirondack spruce, the same side and back wood, the same neck wood, and they were twins. They are twins, other than that single tone bar versus two tone bars. And of course, my buddy Dave, whom I made it for, I didn't tell him which was which, but he picked them both up and played them, and he said, "Give me that one," and it was the one with the single tone bar. And he picked it right away. It's a little bit more forward, and perhaps that tune emphasize the treble strings. I don't know. It was just the tune I picked. But it's you're right. It's a very comfortable little guitar to hold. I think what was the guy's name? Bruce Sexauer in California. He's been building for a long, long time, and he came up with a name for one of his guitars he builds. He called it a couch noodler, and that's exactly what these little guitars are perfect for. Is just laying back on the couch and just noodling around a little bit. They're great for that. They're very comfortable to play. So there's that part. The Larson, I kind of got enamored with that a few years ago on another chat group. That there was a fellow there by the name of Johann Brentrout was his name, and he lives in Minneapolis. And I went to his website and looked at his guitars. Yeah, there's his book on the left side, Build the Obscure American Guitar. That's by Johann. And I've met him. My son lives in Minneapolis, so whenever I go to visit my son, I make an appointment and go visit Johann, and we gab about guitars for a while. These guitars were built, between 1900 and 1940 is roughly the span of the Larson brothers, and they were only two guys in Chicago. They emigrated from Sweden, and they built guitars for 40 years. That's what they did. They built all kinds of different brand names. Prairie State is one of their brand names. Let's see, what other ones? Dreyer. They built a lot of harp guitars. Pretty fascinating stuff. And the book on the right, of course, is a history book about the Larson brothers and what they built, written by their grandson, by the way. And so it was kind of interesting to get into that and get interested in it. The difference between the Larson, as we go on to the next slide, you'll see which one is that? The one with the tops? Top and back. So on the left, you see the top of the inside of the Larson. And of course, right away, you'll notice there's laminated bracing. The X brace is laminated. That was one of the features that the Larsons came up with. This was before carbon fiber existed. So what they would do is they would take the leftover pieces of sidewood and laminate a piece of spruce on each side, and that was their bracing. And it made it quite a bit more stiff. As you can hear, it's a good stiff top because of those braces. The X, the angle on the X brace is wider on the Larson brothers. It's like 105 degrees as opposed to 95 or 98 degrees on a Martin. And what that does, if theoretically, what that does is that gives you a little bit more beachfront property on the lower bout. Let's see what else. And you can see the tone bars in the lower bout are, one looks like it's in the normal place and the other one is at the different angle. That's how they did it. There's no scalloping of those braces. They're just, I think, 3/16 of an inch tall, and that's it. The bridge pad. Go ahead.
You want to talk about? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I was afraid you're about to forget your maple bar right
yes.
here.
The bridge patch is maple, and that's something that that Johann in Minneapolis does. And I followed his recipe from start to finish. I did not follow what Robbie had taught me. I just wanted to do something different, and this is something different. So he said he used a maple bridge patch, so that's what I put in. The upper transverse brace is also a piece of maple, so it's a little bit stiffer up there. Between the upper part of the X and the upper transverse brace, that's a doubler. It goes from one shore to the other. It makes it quite a bit stiffer. The other thing you'll notice, maybe not on the top, but on the back photo, you'll notice that all the braces, every one of them gets tucked. into the lining, into the kerfing, which is another difference between what we do or what we were taught to do to make something that sounds similar to a Martin. This is these are all tucked. Even the little finger braces are tucked into the lining. Let's see, where was I going to go with that? And the opposite end of those braces, the finger braces, are not butted up against the X. They're, maybe 1/8 of an inch away from the X, right there. Yes. So it's those are the differences in the bracing. The other thing that is different here that Johann does is he builds his guitars by numbers, by thickness. He doesn't flop them. He doesn't tap them. He doesn't flex them. And so I followed his recipe. Now, this top right under the bridge is 0.125 thick. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. And it tapers out to the edge of the lower bout to about 0.1 inch. So it there's a taper to the top. I was skeptical, and like many of you here, it's a little bit too tinny for me sounding. However, I had a friend over one time to play it, and he's kind of a blues player. He loved it because he could really dig into those mid strings with his blues licks, and they really sounded fantastic. Now, I can't do that, but he could. And for that sound, that seemed to be a good idea to brace it this way for that kind of a sound. He could really make it growl, but I can't. So there's that. Let's see, and you'll also notice on the picture of the back, there's a couple of carbon fiber rods in there. And what the Larson brothers did in early 30s, well, mid 30s or so, they came up with a brand name called Prairie State. And maybe you've heard of Prairie State guitars. But one of the innovations they did for that was they put a steel rod down the center of the guitar body from the top to the bottom. And what Johann came up with was, he said, his thought was, well, that means it's impossible to reach in there and fix anything, which is true. And so being modern times, he used carbon fiber and split it in half on each side. So that's what he did there. I'll tell you, that makes the body of the guitar quite stiff, and isolates the top more than it would be otherwise. At least in my mind, that's how that helps. That guitar is really stiff in that way. So the top can do all the moving and nothing else moves, which I guess gives it a little bit of a sound. I don't know. The back and sides of this one are white oak, which are kind of pretty. I kind of like white oak. It's a good wood to work with. I don't know. I just kind of like it.
I was listening to one of those the luthier podcast, and he had I forget the guy's name, but he talked about this type of the setup with the carbon fiber. But instead of the carbon fiber going to braces in the back, it goes to braces in the waist, and he analogized it to flying buttresses.
Yes.
And that not only does it free up the top, but it also takes a lot of pressure off that neck joint, and solves the problem of splitting, and allows for just different movement of the neck, just to make a more stable guitar overall.
Yeah.
So
I believe
Gary,
who you're referring to there, Gary, was Rick Turner, I believe, that
Yes.
came up with that system.
Yeah, Rick Turner.
Are you saying that the rods go from here to here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, look up, do a Google search for Rick Turner flying buttresses, and there's a couple of articles with some pretty cool photos in them.
Yeah, it's very much along that idea, but I don't know if the Larsons were the first to have a rod going through guitar body or not. But that's what they did in the mid to late 30s. And the brand name is Prairie State, if you wanted to look that up. But it was an interesting build. Very interesting build. Took me a long time because I had other stuff going on. But
Steve, what's the scale length of this?
25 and a half.
Okay.
Well, 25.4.
Okay.
Add in compensation, and it's 25 and a half.
Right. And so you use regular light gauge strings on it?
I think the strings were, I think I put 12 and a half Martin strings on it.
Okay.
12 and a half, or 0.012 for the high E. And I think the low E was 0.54.
Yeah.
So not quite as light as you can go, but certainly not a heavy 12 string gauge either. So let's see. Let me look at my notes here, see if I've forgotten anything. No, that's about it. I made the kerfing for it, and I had a piece of maple hanging around, so I made the kerfing out of maple, thinking that would stiffen up the sides a bit. And it apparently did. It's quite stiff. I think if I build another one of these, I'll make the top using the flop test rather than a measurement, and go that way, but leave everything else the same. And I'll report back in about 5 years when I get that done. Because I build like everybody else whenever I can in the evenings or weekends, and I'm pretty sure everybody has a honey-do list just like mine.
So Steve, it's interesting that you bring this up, because it seems to me right now, among particularly some younger players, they're hunting out those old Stellas. They're hunting out those guitars that to me look like they just take all your calluses off if you tried to play them, because they're playing that sort of music. They're playing a sort of a bluesy style or slide guitar, alternate tunings, and they want that. Does this have a flat top and back on it? Is it flat, or is it?
I forgot about that. Very good question. What the I think the I don't know if they originated this or not, but the Larson brothers would arch their guitars, their guitar tops, not in a dome, but in a cylindrical shape, as if it were the inside of a pipe. And I think theirs was a 12-foot cylinder that they would arch it. That does a couple of things. It stiffens it up a little bit, and it also eliminates the problem that some of us have, or we've all had at one time or another, of getting the neck angle just right without the fretboard having a hump or a fall off, because the top is completely straight in that direction from front to back. But yet you still have an arch. It's just, side to side is the arch, but not front to back. So yeah, that's a good question, and a major difference in how we're used to doing things.
Yeah, so to me it's interesting that these were built back, mid 30s, 40s, and the music then was a little different than what people play now. And as people start to bring that back out, they're hunting for guitars that gave them that sort of sound.
Yeah, well, one of the book that Johann wrote, he describes how to build this, what you're seeing. He also describes how to build 12 strings, and a 12 string. He's built several of those. Stella is one of the brands that he mimicked, and Hope Facel was the other one. I've never heard of them, but they built 12 strings, or somebody built them and called them that. So those guitars, the 12 strings that are in this book that you're seeing, are ladder braced, and even thicker on the tops because of the ladder bracing and the 12 strings. And I've sat in Johann's living room and played one that was built that way. you've heard the phrase lap piano? That 12-string just filled the room with sound. It wasn't loud. It just filled the room with sound. It was amazing to me. And that was a ladder brace guitar. So, the X brace is a great, fantastic way to build a guitar, but it's not the only way to build a guitar. I haven't built a 12-string yet, but it's on my list.
All right, so let's look at one other. So what this is the Larson top, and then I just went out on the internet and got a Martin double aught, so you can compare and see some of the differences in what the Larsons did in the Martin double aught. And we've already talked about this some, but this is a photograph of an older top. Steve, you want to talk about the differences again here, or take some questions
Sure.
or comments?
Well,
from the crowd?
we already talked about the X brace. You can very easily see the difference in the angle, and of course the laminations, and the finger braces are going off in a different angle, and of course the tone bars, and then the bridge patch. An interesting side story. Over the past 10 years, I do a lot of playing around, experimenting with this stuff, and I was interested in figuring out whether a ebony bridge sounded better or a rosewood bridge sounded better on a steel string guitar. Well, how am I going to do that without building two guitars? And then you have all these other differences between building two guitars. So what I did was I built a guitar and strung it up in the white, and and I used the StewMac bridge bolts. I got 6 of them, and I would bolt on 3 different bridges that I made. One bridge was ebony, one bridge was maple, and the third bridge was made out of ash. That's what I had around, and it was and the bridge patch on that guitar was rosewood, East Indian rosewood. So I could replace the bridge relatively quickly and do no damage to the guitar, and then I could play it for a day or so. I was amazed at how that changed the sound of the guitar. We all know what an ebony bridge sounds like, and we kind of all know what a East Indian rosewood bridge sounds like on a steel string guitar. And I'm here to tell you that a maple bridge sounds even tinnier than the Larson does. I mean, it was amazing. It hurt my ears. I didn't play that one very long before I took that bridge off. But
how was the weight on those, Steve?
Well, I don't remember. I don't think I measured the weight of them. I was just interested in the sound difference. But they were all the same exact size. I made them from the same pattern.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I don't have that information, but they sounded amazingly different.
Sure.
The maple one was I don't think I'll use a maple bridge patch again unless somebody says, "Hey, I want a really trebly sounding guitar." Well, that'll do it. No doubt about it. That'll do it. Of course, that guitar ended up with an ebony bridge glued onto it, which was the sound I liked. But the 2 bridge patches you see here, those guitars are going to sound different, and that's one of the things that contributes to that difference. I like the sound of an ebony bridge with an East Indian rosewood bridge patch on an Addy top, but that's my preference. Everybody else has their own preferences.
So I have a question for the group. Steve and I sort of talked about this on the Larson. Remember that they've doubled up the spruce here. This is a double thickness on the top. And this got that huge maple brace. But my question is, how much, once you put your, even on the Martin, once you get these heavier braces, popsicle stick, got the neck block glued on, your Kerfing's coming around. This top part both guitars is relatively constrained. How much do you think that it really contributes to the sound, whether this section was doubled up or not? That's my question. The brain, does that really change anything? What do y'all think?
Well, I think that since there's a great big hole in the middle of that part of the guitar, you got to have it braced pretty well so that it doesn't fold up. The sound difference would be, it would probably sound different as it folded up between one or the other. It would crack differently. I'm teasing you, Elaine.
Oh, I understand. That's why I wasn't responding. So, yeah. So my question is, for strength wise, did they have a really good idea with the double that doesn't cost you much of the sound? I'm just interested in what the group thinks.
Yeah. I'll shut up and listen.
I think maybe you're asking the wrong question. I think maybe you're asking the question that needs to be asked is how do you effectively brace the top portion of the guitar so you still get some movement out of the top, rather than putting as much on there as you can to deaden it, because otherwise you're only getting movement from half the instrument.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know the answer. I'm a novice at this. I've just been curious. Somebody else, what do you think?
I don't know the answer either, but I do know that the classical guitarists, a lot of them put that donut around the sound hole area, and of course it doesn't go quite all the way out like the Larson picture there, but it's not uncommon for some of the makers to use a donut there. I call it a donut. It could be square, whatever, to reinforce that sound hole area. And I, don't think it makes a difference on the classical guitar. I've heard some great sounding guitars with them, some great sounding guitars without them. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a good question.
It just looks to me like it's already so constrained that the spruce isn't going to constrain it anymore, and it might help you with cracking, or with damage, especially somebody picking around there and hitting it or whatever. So I was just curious. I don't know what the real math is on that.
I don't either, but if you were building a 12 string, this would help.
A good question would be, how many of these instruments survived?
Yeah.
Probably a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are Larsons around. There's people that collect them, but they're not as numerous as Martins were from that era, because there were only two guys building them versus a factory full of people building Martin guitars. So they just didn't have that big of a market. So I don't know how many Larsons there are. Maybe the history book on the Larsons would have that in one of the appendices that I, of course, didn't read.
They seem a lot more stout than the Martins on the right.
Yes, they
so that leads me to think that there's probably they survived, or at least didn't deform perhaps as much as those pre-war Martins.
Now, you also have to realize that I built the Larson based on Johann's way of building. I'm not sure that the Larsons built it exactly that way. I know they used the laminated X-brace, and their bracing scheme was what you see here, but maybe they thinned their tops just like we were taught, and got a different sound that way. So to me, it kind of opened up my mind to, well, I've never liked Gibsons, but maybe there's something there because Gibsons are braced differently than Martins. And all the blues players in the 20s and 30s played Gibsons, not because they sounded great probably, but because they were half the price.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that goes into what becomes popular and what doesn't. Now,
Steve, let me shift a little bit to a different topic that you and I talked about yesterday. So, folks, let's forget about the Larson for just a minute. I did a look on the internet, and I know where could I find an image to grab that showed me a single lock top that was braced. And so let's look at this double off though and pretend that this is Steve's off. So Steve, which one of these tone bars did you leave off? Or
Well,
how is this brace like what you did should be the first question. How close
well,
is this brace?
it's very similar to the single lot, other than the single lot's, of course, a good bit smaller than this one. What I did was that single tone bar that I put on here starts up by the bridge patch, but ends where the second tone bar would end near the edge of the guitar. I just drew a diagonal across there.
Like that.
Yeah. And
All
that's
right.
how I did it. And I did the usual tap and flex that Robbie taught me to when I created these two single lot guitars, and so they were braced. They were what's the right word here? Voiced in the same way. Each of them, just one of them had a single tone bar and the other one had two. So the single tone bar, that tone bar might have ended up a little taller than the two tone bars in the other one. But I didn't do it by measurement. I just did it by sound and flex, by feel. Does that help?
Yeah, very much so. So do you think it's possible, since the alts are smaller, which means you have, less top you're fooling with?
Yep, less
This
real estate.
one is plenty. I mean, you don't need two, it's plenty. And maybe if you have the two-tone bars, you're actually over braced.
Well, one other thing that I noticed that I just now thought of based on your question was the single tone bars, single lot, the bridge is definitely rotated forward more than the one with two tone bars. Okay. It looks different now. That I don't know how much that contributes to or takes away from the volume of the sound that it puts out. But it does put out more volume, and that bridge is really rotated. I can see it very easily looking across the across that guitar.
Have you measured the amount of rotation?
No, not at all.
Okay.
It's easy to see.
Okay.
It's just I haven't measured it.
It's not getting close to structural integrity issues though.
Well, I don't know. That guitar's been around for 5
Only
years.
time will tell.
After 5 years, it hasn't fallen apart. So I guess not.
Okay.
But 5 years is pretty relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
Steve, where'd you get your design for your alt?
I think Georgia Luthier Supplies is where I got the plans, and the plans are a suggestion.
Yeah.
But once you learn the bracing scheme and where things go, it's relatively the same in every guitar size. It's just things are spread out more on a bigger guitar, but the relationship of where the braces go are pretty similar.
And I didn't notice, but it's a 14 or a 12 fretters on the alt.
Those are 12 fret. The Larson is a 12 fret. Of course, the Dreadnought was a 14 fret. And again, my goal here was to demonstrate looseness versus stiffness. And this is it's hard to do that unless you build the same guitar 4 or 5 times with one difference each. So my hope was to demonstrate that stiffness gives you this kind of sound, looseness gives you a different kind of sound, even though we had guitars that were slightly different in size.
I think that certainly demonstrated it.
Yes. Well, you taught the lesson, so here you are. I didn't plan this 10 years ago, because this is over a period of 8 or 10 years. It just kind of happened this way. And then when Elaine said, hey, demonstrate something, the idea popped into my head. Hey, I've got the tools. I can demonstrate this difference between looseness and stiffness to you guys and gals.
Other questions about these?
What about the finish, Steve, on all of those instruments? Was the finish all the same?
No. Well, the Martin is whatever Martin does.
Lacquer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever their special sauce is. The two single lots, the top is French polished with straight shellac.
Okay.
The back and sides and neck are True Oil. I was playing with True Oil at the time, and
Nice.
that worked out okay. It isn't as pretty as or as flashy and shiny as lacquer or shellac would be, but it works okay. It's
Sure.
very nice.
Sure. Yeah.
And the Larson, I used BJ's. That's called Shellac Finishes, right? Is that the
Yes.
name of the
Yeah.
Shellac Finishes? His
The
post
Royal Lac.
Yep, post cat Royal Lac.
Okay.
And I didn't have a spray gun at the time, so I brushed it on and sanded it back.
Ugh.
And, I now have Popeye arms because of that.
Mhm.
It can be done, but it ain't pretty.
Right.
So it's a very nice finish. It's pretty tough. I think it polished up real well. So I like that finish for steel string guitars.
So, Steve, when you think about these three guitars, the two aughts and the Larson, what are your big takeaways from it?
Well, the single aught size, I'm in love with. It's just a comfortable guitar. It's real easy to hug that thing in and just play. And it's got a pleasing sound and whatnot. The Larson, not so much. It's too tight for me, just like it is for quite a few of you here. It's just too tight. But I could make it again and make it looser. So I've gone to that extreme, and now I'm going to pull it back a little bit because I know what that's like. I can now, okay, I won't do it that thick anymore in various places to get back to a sound that I like. The thing I do like about the Larson is I can hear the midtones a little bit better. They seem more crisp to me. There's less bass than I'd like, but I like the mids. But I don't like the tinniness either. So I would do it differently next time. What was the other thing I was going to talk about? I don't know. I think if you're a bluegrasser, there's nothing like a Dread. There's just nothing like a Dread. That's the gold standard for bluegrass music is a Dread. All these other things are basically, couch noodlers or finger style guitars mostly.
What are you building now, Steve?
Well, I've got 3.5 granddaughters. The other one's due next month. And so I decided I'd better start learning how to make ukuleles.
Yep.
And so I'm starting on ukuleles now. I just finished building a jungle gym for one of my granddaughters. But
did you flop test it?
Well, no. I asked my the other granddaughter I have here in Colorado. I asked her to come test it, but that hasn't happened yet. She
Where are you in Colorado?
I'm in Longmont, which is north of Denver, 30-40 miles.
I'm in downtown Denver.
Okay. So,
Steve, I'm curious, what got you into this whole guitar building thing?
Yeah.
So back in 1966, when this was published, I was, I think, 13 years old or so, and my dad was into woodworking as a hobby, and he got this book sent to him. He never built a guitar, but I was really into John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and that guitar book was gold for me. So I read it from cover to cover back then, and never built a guitar until I moved back out here to Denver. And I think it was 2008 when we came back out here. And I think I showed up in Robbie's class at the college in 2010. Is that about right?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And it was like hog heaven for me. Like, man, this is the dream I've had all of my life. And this guy's going to make me do it. So thank you, Robbie. It was marvelous. It still is. I have yet to grow tired of it. Now, one of the things I've thought about doing, but decided not to, was get into the what Trevor Gore has going on with measuring everything sonically and down to a thousandth of an inch and all that, and doing all that. And at one point in time, Robbie gave me the opportunity to play with a CNC machine for 6 months or so, and that was cool. But my day job is I program on a mainframe computer, and I look at dumps. I'm thinking about ones and zeros all the time, and how to run this huge business on a mainframe and whatnot, and all this technical detail. And it dawned on me that the reason I like building guitars is because it is completely analog versus completely digital. I need some place for my head to go that isn't the middle of a computer. I needed something that had no numbers to it.
I hear
And
you.
so I'm quite sure that, I mean, for example, Greg's guitar that he demonstrated last month, I was just fascinated by the sound of that thing. I don't know why, but he does it by numbers with his version of what Mr. Gore taught, and that's fascinating to me. But yeah, maybe when I retire and quit thinking about computers, I'll get into that. But right now, it's an analog place for my brain to go. So that's kind of it for me. I'm absolutely. I'm sure that there's a, it will get you closer to what the sound you have in your head than the method I'm using now. But that's okay. I'm happy with what I'm doing now. And as you can tell, I don't build the same thing more than once, unless I build them at the same time, like the pair of single O's. So that's just me.
How many instruments have you built now, Steve?
Well, it depends on what you consider an instrument.
That didn't go in the fireplace.
Oh, maybe I don't know, 18 or 20. If
Wow.
you count the dulcimer and
Wow.
the mandolins and the banjos and the guitars I've made. So 18 or 20 instruments, but they're not all guitars.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's to me, it's just a real trip. It's where I go when I want to get away.
So, Steve, one of my hopes has been that as people take a notion they might want to build guitars, Robbie would send them to these videos, and they'd get to hear stories of people who had other day jobs and didn't know what they were doing when they started out, and now they're actually building guitars and talking about them. So
Yeah.
my question for you is, what advice would you have, and I'll throw this open to the rest of you too. What advice would you have for people thinking about getting started building guitars?
Well, I would tell them to go out in the street and find a rock, a little one, throw it up in the air, and wherever it comes down, you start there. Just do it. That's it. There's no other advice I can give. Is just get after it and get it done. You'll either like it or you won't. So you got to start. That's all.
Yeah.
My other wish is to be able to, because I'm not interested in selling guitars at all. My other wish is to have my guitars go into somebody's hands that's going to play it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't go to taverns very much, so I don't get out there to listen to live music, especially these days. But I think I'm going to have to get off my fuzzy pink butt and go do that and try and just put some guitars in people's hands and listen to them. Because I can play it against the wall and hear it, but it's not the same thing. Because I'm not a great guitar player, and you're not in front of your own guitar when you play it. You can't get it unless there's this video that Robbie did that you watched. When I watched it, I said, "Wow, I'm that old." Damn. I also thought, well, he's got this new camera that is like a 4K camera or whatever it is. It adds 10 years to your self-image. You need a fuzz filter on there, Robbie.
Yeah.
Not a cat filter.
But the thing that I enjoyed a lot was being able to hear the front of that guitar being played, even though it was being played by me. I got to hear it out front. They sound different than they do when you're behind it. So I don't know.
You know, Steve, I think you also have reinforced what I've had to learn, and maybe some of the rest of you have, and I've already learned it a long time ago, but I sort of started all this journey thinking there was the guitar and I was going to figure out how to build it, but there's a lot of them and they're all good and they have their own personalities, and there's not just the one, and yours proved that, because every one of them sounded great.
Well, different.
I probably couldn't drive that Larson. I don't think I can hit one that hard, but it was so stiff, but they all sounded great. But they're all their own guitar, and so there's a lot of room for, I don't know if it's innovation, but there's a lot of room for difference. And
yeah. The other point that you and I talked about yesterday was, you follow a recipe of one kind or another, what Robbie teaches or what Hans wrote in his book, or anybody else you want to pick. You can't screw this up. You'll get a guitar out of it that'll sound like a guitar. There's, you cannot fail at this if you're persistent. You just cannot.
Mm-hmm.
But as you can see or hear, subtle differences in bracing can make noticeable differences in tone. So, as Forrest Gump said, you get what, everything's like a box of chocolates. Sometimes you get a cherry one and sometimes you don't.
So let me ask the group, do you all have any other questions as we start to wind this up? Wind it down, I guess, instead of winding up.
Yeah, I'm already wound up.
I thought it was fantastic, Elaine. Steve,
yeah.
Very good.
Thank you so much, Steve. I love the comparison. At least live, I can hear it. And Robbie, I don't know how well that came through on the audio. I don't know if you can.
No, I think it was fine. I could hear the difference. Yeah.
All right. Good
Well,
deal.
I think a lot of that difference, whether you hear it or not, depends on the speakers you have on your end.
Right.
Because of course I can hear it in person. It's very, very obvious. But on the little tablet that I'm looking at right now, I could barely hear the difference on this little machine. So it matters.
Get yourself a good set of headphones and listen to that video again. You'll hear the difference.
Robbie,
well, I can just put the guitars and play them.
Yeah, Robbie, you might want to put that in the notes for this one, that people might want to grab a set of headphones so they can listen to that recording.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Pretty well, because I could hear it better when I did that the first time. That's for sure.
Okay.
One thing I'll suggest to anybody that wants to is I'd like to do this again sometime, or have someone else do it with classical guitars,
right?
And how those are different.
You've got a couple of nice classicals, Steve.
Yeah, I've got that in a flamenco, but maybe that's next month or next year or whenever.
Okay.
But there are other people that just build classical guitars that would be able to demonstrate that better, I think. Right, Robbie?
We'll see.
Yeah, you've always got guitars around. You can play the same tune on every guitar that gets built in your shop and use that as a demo. I don't know. There's just the same discussion we can have with the classical guitar design and bracing.
Sure.
Here, and there's probably more different ways to brace a classical guitar than there are ways.
There's a lot of ways. Yeah.
So,
well, any more questions, comments?
Enjoyed it very much, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. A lot of effort to put that video together. It's really great.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie, for letting me come down and
you're quite welcome.
Waste an hour of your time drinking coffee and playing guitar.
And
sounds like good times.
Yep. Thank you, Robbie, for letting us do this. And I hope to see all of you all live again. It's great to have people to help me ask questions and pitch in. So thank you so much for showing up tonight.
Thank you.
All right.
Very much.
Yep. Thank you, Elaine. Thank you, Steve. Over and out. We'll see you guys, everybody, next month.
Take care, guys.
See you later.